Well, good afternoon, my opera-loving friends, or even opera-curious friends. Listen, we're going to start talking about my favorite art form in just a moment, but first, I've got exciting news out of Hollywood. Gather around, listen carefully, because you may have missed this in the papers or on TV. But exciting news out of Tinseltown, a major Hollywood studio has just announced they're going to do a multi-million-dollar remake of Gone with the Wind. Aren't you excited? This'll be great. I have a few details. Jennifer Aniston has signed on to play Scarlett O'Hara, and Keanu Reeves is going to give us his Rhett Butler. Wow, I can't wait. What, you're not excited? Gosh, through my headphones here in the lavish WHRO studios, I hear moaning and groaning. What's the problem? You're not excited about that? Yeah, well, guess what? I'm kidding. That's not going to happen. However, if you go to the movies, you may be aware that this past summer, there were a couple of remakes that didn't do so well at the box office. They remade Ben-Hur, of all things, and I swear to you, I went on the internet to see who was in the cast, and I never heard of any of those actors. And it didn't really clean up very much. I don't think it made back the cost of the budget. And then you also probably saw that there was a new version of Ghostbusters in which the ghost-chasing crew was replaced by an all-female bunch of actresses. And a lot of people hated that, thought it was a sacrilege. Other people thought, this is great. It's great for gender equality and so forth. However, the movie cost $140 million, and it only to date has made back half of that amount. People don't care for remakes. One of my favorite screwball comedies was The In-Laws with Alan Arkin and Peter Falk. It just cracks me up every time. A few years later, there was a remake with Michael Douglas and Albert Brooks, and I'm sorry I never even cracked a smile. It just had lost the zaniness of the original. Remakes are a problem. So the reason I went into all of this is that a lot of people don't understand that Rossini's Barbiere di Sevilla, the Barber of Seville, which opens, of course, a week from today at the Harrison Opera House in Norfolk, it was a remake. Rossini's comedy, which may be the greatest situation comedy in entertainment history as far as I'm concerned, it was a remake of an opera which had been beloved and popular, a smash hit for 34 years before Rossini made his version in 1816. And that accounts probably for the fact that the first performance of Rossini's Barber was one of those epic failures that make such interesting anecdotes in the opera world. There are three legendary masterpieces that failed at their first performances: Barber of Seville, Carmen, and Madama Butterfly. And the remake that we're talking about, Rossini understood that there was a danger that his opera would be resented by the folks who don't like remakes, because the previous version was by Giovanni Paisiello, who was an exact contemporary of Mozart. And this Paisiello Barber of Seville, and of course they're both based on the historically wonderful play by Beaumarchais, French playwright. This was, people did not see the need to remake it. It wasn't broke, why fix it? It swept all across Europe. It had its first performance in Russia at the court of the Tsar, and it caught on everywhere and made Paisiello rich and famous. So the Paisielloites, who thought it was a sacrilege to try to replace that opera by this young upstart, the 24-year-old Rossini, they came prepared to hate it. And there was a kind of a claque of those people sitting out in the audience, and they booed and hissed and laughed inappropriately at things that weren't supposed to be funny. And Rossini was quite miffed. And yet, before long, Rossini's caught on. And it sort of drove out the memory of Paisiello's beloved opera and has since relegated it to pretty much the archives of opera history. There are a few random recordings of Paisiello's Barber. It's occasionally done maybe by a college opera theater or at a festival for historical interest, but it is not in the standard repertoire, and Virginia Opera will never perform it. I doubt if the Metropolitan will ever perform it, and there are performances, dozens of performances every year of Barber by Rossini. So it's difficult for you and me, for those who are opera lovers. Rossini's Barber is so familiar. It's so iconic with the Largo a Factorum, Figaro, 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 and Rosina's spectacular aria Una voce poco fa. It's hard to process this and imagine how it sounded to that first audience in 1816. Not only the ones who hated it, but the ones who came to understand how wonderful Rossini's was. It's difficult for us to divorce ourselves from the verdict of history and not hear it as something familiar and beloved. It's hard to hear it as something new. And that's my goal today. I want to help you listen to Rossini's music without the context of your familiarity with it. Why is it so much better than Paisiello's? I can help you with that this afternoon, because you see, since they're both following the same source material by Beaumarchais, the librettos are extremely similar. They are almost parallel. So if in Paisiello, if a guy sings a song about a strawberry milkshake, then there's going to be a song about a strawberry milkshake in Rossini. So we can do a little bit of a side-by-side comparison with just a few numbers. And this will help you understand what Rossini brought to the table that people finally realized was lacking in Paisiello. And I want to tell you this. It's not that Rossini is good and Paisiello is bad. The Paisiello opera is lovely. It's charming. The music is fantastic. It's worthy of being performed. The problem is that Rossini's Barber is without a doubt the greatest remake of any show ever, be it a play or an opera or a movie. So let's dig into this a little bit and do a little bit of side-by-side comparison. Paisiello is good, but if you've ever watched cooking shows by Emeril, that chef Emeril Lagasse, he has that catchphrase, "Let's kick it up a notch." Bam! And then he puts in some cayenne pepper or something. I'm going to show you how, with this material, Rossini kicked it up a notch. Now, we can start at the top of the show. One of the first things that happens is the Count Almaviva is going to sing a serenade to this pretty girl who's caught his eye, and that's the young orphan Rosina. And just to briefly go over the premise of the plot, Rosina is the ward of the guy who's been raising her since her parents died, and that's Dr. Bartolo. And Dr. Bartolo keeps her kind of a house prisoner. He never lets her go out and socialize because the moment she turns of age, he wants to marry her himself, despite the fact he's old enough to be her father at least. And this is all because of the purse strings. Rosina's going to inherit a fortune, and he wants to come into that very wealthy dowry. So she never gets to go out, but she goes out and takes the fresh air on her boudoir balcony, and here's this young, handsome nobleman, Count Almaviva. She sees him, he sees her, there's a wink-wink, there's chemistry, there's some long-distance flirting, and he's determined to try to get past the household guards that prevent people from coming in to visit Rosina at Dr. Bartolo's mansion and get her out of there. Now, of course, she doesn't know he's a wealthy count. He's afraid that she, when you're wealthy and famous, you're afraid that people will only love you for your money. So the count pretends to be a penniless student named Lindoro. And there's a serenade in each of these two versions by Paisiello and by Rossini. First, let's listen to a little bit of Paisiello's serenade for Lindoro. It's a lovely aria called Saper Bramate, and it goes something like this. Isn't that charming? There's nothing wrong with that. It's very effective. It's a nice tune. It's the kind of tune, indeed, you might find yourself humming as you went out to the lobby for intermission after Act One. It's good. Now, just for comparison, 34 years after Paisiello's opera of 1775, let's hear what Rossini does with the exact same number, a Serenade for Lindoro.
Dal mio labbro il nome ascoltate. Io son Lindoro che fido vado, che sposa vi bramo, che a nome vi chiamo, che a nome vi chiamo. Di voi sempre parlando così,
now, what's the difference between those two? Here's how I would express it. The quality that is present in Rossini's Serenade that I don't hear in Paisiello's can be summed up with this word: yearning. This is supposed to be a lovesick young man in the throes of a heavy crush on a pretty girl who is tantalizingly out of reach. That's the, when I think of the Paisiello number, that particular melody, dee da 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 da, dee da da dum da da. It's pleasant, it's attractive, it shows off the tenor voice, but it's a little bit generic. He could just as easily be singing a lullaby. That's a number that would work, a melody that you could apply to a lullaby, or to a song about nature, or to something religious about the love of God. Rossini absolutely nails that lovesick quality of yearning. But he didn't stop there. Rossini added something that's not in Bon Marché and it's not in Paisiello. He added a second serenade. Actually, the one you just heard is the second one. He led off the show with a first serenade because, frankly, that serenade, the lovesick serenade, it's a little bit tame and slow-moving and down-tempo for the opener of a show, for an opening number. Rossini said, we've got to get this thing off to a little bit more lively start. So he gave the Count a first serenade that's more virtuosic, more up-tempo, brighter, and more dazzling. And the deal is that he brings in his own little orchestra. He's a Count, he's wealthy, so he brings in a little chamber orchestra that's going to play for him. And as you'll see on the other side of this excerpt, that's also going to give him an opportunity for some real farcical humor. So we had Lovesick Yearning in the second one, but in this first one, it's all about the giddy joy of love, the ecstasy, the bliss, and so forth. So we're going to get here a little bit of that bel canto coloratura.
D'amore felice momento
See, that's how you want to open an entertaining opera, with some fireworks, but also with some laughs. There's nothing intrinsically comic about the Paisiello serenade or Rossini's second serenade, the two numbers that correspond. Now, where the humor comes in is this. Prior to the virtuosic serenade you just heard, the musicians have a short little vignette where they enter on tiptoe. See, it's before dawn. This is going to be a sunrise serenade. And Count Almaviva, disguised as Lindoro, he doesn't want to wake up Bartolo's household, who will chase him away, maybe call the cops. He doesn't want to wake up the neighbors. So as the musicians enter, there's an elaborate shushing. Piano, pianissimo, they say to each other. Quiet, non parlar, don't talk, shh. And it always reminds me, that there's a famous Warner Brothers cartoon of Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd acting out the Barber of Seville. I've always seen how that makes sense because there's a lot of humor that is very similar to Warner Brothers animation. When the musicians are shushing each other so elaborately, I always think of Elmer Fudd staring into the camera with his hunting cap and his shotgun, telling you, the audience, be very, very quiet. So they're all shushing and tiptoeing. He sings the serenade, and then following the serenade, the Count says, well, thanks, fellas, I don't need you anymore today, and oh, by the way, I'm ready to pay you. And at the mention of money, they go berserk. These same musicians who were tiptoeing and being very quiet just moments ago suddenly go nutso, and they swarm and chase the Count around the stage, shouting for their money. Well, it sounds like this. Just pure silliness that for me never gets old. It's a moment I always look forward to. So you see, Emeril Rossini just kicked it up a notch. Bam. He gave a fireworks solo to the Count to kind of get the audience really involved and engaged, and he gave them some pretty good laughs at the same time. All right, let's turn to our title character, Figaro, the Barber of Seville. And you know that barbers in those days, as Steve Martin taught us in a classic Saturday Night Live sketch, they did a lot more than snip your hair and ask you if you wanted it blocked or tapered in the back. They were dentists, they were doctors, they were delivery men, and in this case, Figaro is going to be a matchmaker for the Count and be the idea man who helps him get inside Dr. Bartolo's house to spirit away that young girl and help the Count do his wooing. So in Paisiello, Figaro comes out immediately at the very top of the show before the serenade. And one of the things he likes to occupy himself with is songwriting. Figaro's a musician, a poet, and a songwriter. And as he enters, he is singing one of the songs he's currently working on, and then saying to himself, "Yeah, that's pretty good." When you in this excerpt, when you hear this Figaro say "giusto, giusto," he's saying, "Yeah, that's what I will. That's not bad. Pretty good job." And there's a lot to recommend this particular initial solo for Figaro. This is the first time we hear from him in Paisiello's Barber of Seville.
Giusto
All right, now that had a lot to recommend it. Again, it's pretty tuneful. Paisiello was a very good melodist, or tunesmith, as we might say these days. And that, when we first hear from an opera character, his music should give us some idea of defining him. Who is he? We get the idea from that excerpt that this Figaro is a happy-go-lucky guy, a guy who's easy in his skin, he's good-natured. We're going to like him. He's likable. Now, that solo in Paisiello is followed by a couple of pages of recitative, sung dialogue, in which it's expository. The Count and Figaro spy each other, and they spend a couple of pages of dialogue letting us know who they are and what's going on. And we find out who Figaro is and his backstory, as it were. Now, all that's well and good. Unfortunately, whatever nice things we can say about Paisiello's Figaro entrance, it pales in comparison to Rossini's, which is, I'm here to tell you, how many operas have been written since the first opera in 1597? Tens of thousands, probably. Out of all the operas ever written, this, my friends, the Largo al Factotum, this is the greatest entrance aria ever written.
Largo factotum dalla città, largo. La 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 la. Ah! Presto bottega che la mangia, presto. La 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 la. Ah! Ah, che bel vivere, che bel piacere, che bel piacere per un barbiere di qualità, di qualità. Ah, bravo Figaro, bravo, bravissimo, bravo! La 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 la. Ah, fortunatissimo per verità, bravo! La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità, fortunatissimo per verità.
Oh, we've heard it a million times, and it remains as sparkling and as witty and as lively as ever, as much for the orchestral writing as for the lively vocal line. So this is, I'm afraid that this Figaro is a much more interesting guy. And there's something about, if you go on and look at the English translation of the Italian text there, Rossini did something else that's very good dramatically. He just rendered those pages of expository dialogue mostly unnecessary, because instead of having dialogue where we find out who Figaro is, he tells us in that aria. He goes on to describe the life of a barber, all the different things he does. So that's good dramatic instinct, to let the music tell the story. That's the mark of an operatic master. It's not a play. We want as little dialogue as possible. We want the music to carry the story. And by the way, not only is it the greatest entrance aria, it's also pretty difficult. One thing, there's something conventional wisdom-like about Paisiello's number for Figaro. It's a warm-up piece. It's not too demanding vocally. And when you're going to be singing for a long time, for several hours on stage in a full-length opera, the custom has often been to give the soloist something more moderate to warm up. Don't make him do the most difficult thing as soon as he walks on the stage when he's a little bit cold still. Let him warm up. Unfortunately, Rossini's Largo al Factotum is a tour de force where one of the most difficult things ever written, with an extremely high tessitura, is the first thing out of Figaro's mouth. Oh, well. Well, we need to meet our prima donna, Rosina. Now, I'm going to play you something. This next segment is going to be an object lesson in the dangers of only listening to opera on CD or on WHRO or any other radio station, when all you get is the audio. You cannot fairly judge what an opera is when you only judge the attractiveness or the beauty of the music. Because, my friends, opera is not a concert, it is theater. And this next excerpt is going to prove that to you. Paisiello gives an initial aria to Rosina, and I'm here to tell you it is absolutely gorgeous. This music is elegant, it's poised, it's, if you didn't know who wrote it, and you know your music styles, you would swear this was by Mozart, and I would understand that because, frankly, Mozart wrote hundreds of pieces that sound pretty much exactly like this. They were contemporaries, and I'm not saying that Paisiello plagiarized Mozart. No, no, no. This is pure Paisiello, but it's in the same style, and it could be mistaken for Mozart because it is that beautiful. Here's Rosina. So what can we conclude from that? I know you wish you could hear the rest of it because it's lovely. Too bad it's wrong. You see, you can't listen to that and think, well, Paisiello is just as good as Mozart at this opera stuff. No, far from it. Mozart would never have assigned a piece like that to the character of Rosina, not the Rosina of the Barber of Seville. Maybe the Rosina of The Marriage of Figaro when she was a little older and a little more mature, sinking into middle age. What do we know about Rosina in The Barber of Seville? How would we describe her? Well, she's a teenager. She's not of age yet. She's sassy. She's pert. She's lively. She's a schemer. She knows what she wants. She's confident. She has attitude. I didn't get that from that Paisiello number. I think that perhaps Paisiello is thinking of Rosina as a little bit like Rapunzel. She's the lovely maiden who's not trapped in a tower, but trapped in her bedroom in Bartolo's mansion, and that she's waiting for, a handsome prince like Almaviva to come along and rescue her. But she's not that passive. She actually is very far from that. Rossini gets that. So with Rossini, in her aria Una voce poco fa, she's saying, that boy down there, that one who sings to me and winks at me, he is going to be mine, and I've got a plan. I know how I'm going to do it. This is a girl who is not passive. She's not a teddy bear on the shelf at the shooting gallery like a prize waiting to be won. She is taking control of things, and that's what we get in this very lively conclusion to Una voce. That's the teenage girl full of attitude who knows what she wants that we expect to find in the character of Rossini. I keep mixing up Rossini and Rosina. Man, I got to go back to regular coffee, no more decaf. Rossini's version takes the prize in that instance, despite the fact that it's a truly beautiful aria that Paisiello composed. Anyway, let's do another side-by-side comparison of Giovanni Paisiello's Barber of Seville with Gioacchino Rossini's. And we come to the character, my favorite character in the show, Don Basilio. Now, Rosina is what we would call homeschooled these days. Because she's a house prisoner in Bartolo's mansion, and this was probably not unusual for girls of the historical period, she has tutors who come in to teach her, to get her education. And of course, in the year 1816, a woman's education pretty much consists of learning music and learning, home ec, we would call it, sewing and cooking, and that's about it. She's not going to be taking comparative literature or architecture. So Don Basilio is the music master, and he's, as many tutors were in those days, he's a minor cleric, so he's in priestly garb, and he comes and gives her, every few days, her singing lesson. And he is the guy we love to hate or hate to love, because he, despite the fact that he's in the clergy, he is an oily, obnoxious, just a weasel of a man. And he and Bartolo are good friends, and when Bartolo conveys his suspicions that this student, Lindoro, who's been hanging around like a tomcat lately, that he's got his eye on Rosina, and that he doesn't know how to get rid of this boy to keep Bartolo's master plan from going kaflooey, Basilio says, well, leave it to me. We'll just use the time-tested method of slander to get rid of him. We'll get the town of Seville gossiping about this boy. So he sings the La Calumnia aria, and this happens in both of the operas, Paisiello and Rossini. La Calumnia, an old-fashioned word, calumny, that simply means slander and gossip. And Basilio is going to demonstrate how gossip works. It starts as a suggestion, a whisper, and then like a storm gathering, it gains in strength and power from a whisper to a breeze, to a gale, to a hurricane, and finally like cannon shots, until finally the guy is, rode out of town on a rail. So in both of these arias, the music is going to graphically describe this process of beginning softly and getting into a big loud roar eventually. And Paisiello, this is probably the strongest number that I've heard in his Barber of Seville. He does a good job. This is pretty good. I would say this is an A- or a B++ version of a calumny aria. There are a lot of wonderful touches both in the vocal writing and in the orchestration. See if you can hear what I'm talking about, that graphic description of a big crescendo of slander.
La calunnia mia, signore, non sapete cos'è. Sol con questa tutte l'ore si può far gran cose a fe. Questa qui, radendo il suolo, incomincia piano piano ed volge il vasto stuolo, la raccoglie rinforzando, passa poi di bocca in bocca ed il diavolo all'orecchia ve la porta e così è, ve la porta e così è. La calunnia intanto cresce, s'alza, fischia, gonfia di sta,
love those little trill figures in the low strings there. That's the blowing of the wind, or maybe the murmuring of the gossips around Seville. And we certainly heard that crescendo and that rising scale in the vocal line. You know, Mozart's Don Giovanni came out just a couple of years after Paisiello's Barber. And by the way, I just have to correct myself. When I told you the opera came out in 1775, I misspoke. That was the date of Beaumarchais' play. Paisiello's opera came out in 1782, 34 years before Rossini's Barber. But anyway, so Don Giovanni came out a couple of years after Paisiello's Barber, and that rising scale in the Don Basilio slander aria, it always reminds me of Leporello's catalog aria. Il grande maestoso, il grande maestoso. The same kind of rising scale effect. So good job, Paisiello. That had a lot going for it. He stepped up to the plate and he hit it out of the park. The problem is Rossini hit it a little bit farther. One thing that is missing in Paisiello's, he's got the whole graphic description of gossip, and we get the power. We have those bellowing top notes for the cannon shots. What we're missing is the element of slyness, of the delicious enjoyment of other people's misery, the schadenfreude. Also, the burden was on the voice to make the crescendo. Listen in Rossini's version how the orchestra is this gathering storm, how the voice is going along for the ride, and how it becomes larger than life. Again, like Emeril Lagasse, Rossini kicks it up a notch and then also gives us the delicious slyness afterwards.
Dalla bocca sto riuscendo, lo schiampasso va crescendo, prende forza poco a poco. Volo già dentro quello, che bel volo la tempesta che descende la foresta, ma fischiando brontolando e ti fa l'orror chiamare, alla finta bocca scoppia, si propaga, si raddoppia e produce un'esplosione come un colpo di cannone, come un colpo di cannone, un tremoto temporale, un tremoto temporale, un tumulto generale che fa l'aria ribombare, un tremoto temporale, un tremoto temporale, un tumulto generale che fa l'aria ribombare. E mestino calunniato, avvilito, calpestato, sotto il pubblico flagello per gazzarte a crepar. E il meschino calunniato, avvilito, calpestato, sotto il pubblico.
Paisiello, in comparison, is a little more straightforward, although I give them both high marks. It's a highlight in either version of Barbiere di Siviglia. Now, the only principal character we haven't heard from is Dr. Bartolo, that takeoff on the old Italian traditional clown Pantalone, the old guy who thinks that he's still attractive to young women and thinks he'd be a suitable match for a pretty young girl, foolishly. Dr. Bartolo gets an aria in which it has come to his attention that, like a naughty young student in homeroom, Rosina has been attempting to pass notes. Did you ever get in trouble for that in homeroom? Well, Rosina is in trouble with her teacher, Dr. Bartolo, because she was trying to drop a love note down to Lindoro in the street below, and unfortunately she was a little careless and got some ink on her fingers. And the moment he sees that ink smudge, Bartolo knows exactly what she's doing. So, he's still her legal guardian, so he kind of reads her the riot act. Young lady, you are grounded. As long as you live under my roof, you will abide by my rules. I will not have this disrespect, and so on and so on. Now, both of the arias are going to be on this same theme. what I want to point out about the difference between them reminds me of a quote that I read from the old vaudeville comedian Ed Wynn. Remember him? He was the guy in the Mary Poppins film whose chair rose up into the air and levitated anytime he laughed. And he was an old-time comedian, and he once defined the difference between a comedian and a comic. Ed Wynn said that a comedian says funny things, whereas a comic says things in a funny way. There's a difference. Now, in Paisiello's aria for Bartolo, I want you to listen. It's very funny. It's very amusing. It's obviously a comedy, but what is the source of the comedy? Is the music itself intrinsically funny, or does the performer use his voice in a way to make it sound funny? Listen to the variety of vocal colors in this Paisiello's version of Bartolo's angry aria.
Ma il dito è nero, con l'inchiostro risanato, egli è certo che
ser può. La pennettina,
la pennettina, fu cagion che sulla vesta nuovo fior si disegnò.
Il foglio manca, il foglio manca.
Alla figlia del barbiere, un cartoccio pien di dolci.
In quest'oggi schifando un'altra volta quando che sorto concatenarci e lucchetti a 100 chiavi mi chiuderò concatenarci a 100 chiavi a 100 chiavi a 100 chiavi mi chiuderò mi chiuderò mi chiuderò a 100 chiavi mi chiuderò mi chiuderò mi chiuderò mi chiuderò mi chiuderò.
Now, did you hear what that performer was doing? Sometimes he sung in an opera voice, but sometimes he did what singers call going off the voice, and using this contrast of vocal colors to make the humor. If he had sung the entire thing, sounding like, Ezio Flagello, just in his big, dark bass baritone voice, a lot of the humor would not be there. That's singing something funny. Now, here's Rossini's version of that aria, in which we're singing a funny thing. There's no way, no vocal color is required to make you giggle here. If you can sing it at all, it's intrinsically funny.
Signorina, un'altra volta quando battono da fuori, signorina, un'altra volta quando battono da fuori, la concini se vittoria, il suo modo la saprà. Signorina, un'altra volta quando battono da fuori, signorina, un'altra volta quando battono da fuori, la concini se vittoria, il suo modo la saprà. E non servono le smorti, faccia pure che sta morta, faccia pure che sta morta. Questo dove quella porta, questo dove quella porta, ne mellare, la potrà. Questo dove quella porta, ne mellare, la potrà. Però sì, innocentina, sconsolata, disperata. E non servono le smorti, faccia pure che sta morta. Questo dove quella porta, ne mellare, la potrà. E non si innocentina, sconsolata, disperata, sconsolata, disperata, in sua camera serrata, in sua camera serrata, in sua camera serrata, dico quando dottorò. Un dottor della mia sorte non si lascia infino piano. Un dottor della mia sorte non si lascia infino piano. E Rossini, innocentina, sconsolata, disperata, in sua camera serrata, mi voglio star d'ora, io voglio star d'ora.
Rapid patter. And somewhere the shade of W.S. Gilbert is saying, now that's what I'm talking about. A rapid patter never gets old. And so that's the difference. They're both acceptable ways of expressing humor in music. One singing something in a funny way, the other singing something that's funny. That's what Ed Wynn was talking about. Well, I've got just a couple more examples to show you of this difference between Paisiello's Barber and Rossini's Barber of Seville. I mentioned earlier that the humor in this type of farce is greatly akin to Warner Brothers animation, the Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd cartoons. And there's another example here. Really, when you look at the plot outline of The Barber of Seville, even in Beaumarchais' original, it is kind of like, well, it makes me think of a Roadrunner Coyote cartoon. Do you ever watch those, or have your watch while your kids were watching when those were on regularly? The structure of a Roadrunner cartoon was this. The coyote wants the Roadrunner, but the Roadrunner is faster, so it's hard to get him. So the coyote tries crazy scheme after crazy scheme. He straps himself to a rocket, but it goes off a cliff. He sends away for roller skates that have jets attached to them, and he can go really fast, but again, it goes comically awry, and he crashes into a cliff. Crazy scheme after crazy scheme that fail and go comically awry. That's really what happens in The Barber of Seville. In this case, the Roadrunner is Rosina, the thing desired. The Count doesn't want to roast her and eat her. He wants to marry her, but she's still the thing we're trying to get. As Alfred Hitchcock would say, the MacGuffin. And Figaro is the idea guy who's going to come up with crazy schemes to try to get our coyote, the Count Almaviva, into the mansion so that he can run away with Rosina and have her get to marry her. And they go comically awry. Act 1 ends with a disaster. The Count pretended to be a drunken soldier who had some sort of royal commission from the head of the army instructing Bartolo to give him room and board. It didn't work out so good, and Act 1 ended in confusion. And in Act 2, we're going to get two crazy schemes, and the difference between this and a Roadrunner cartoon is that it never worked out successfully for Coyote, but eventually the third scheme does work out for the Count. But in the meantime, we've got another one that's going to run into problems. Figaro, at the beginning of Act 2, has sent a note to Don Basilio saying, let's cancel the voice lesson. You're not needed today. Don't come over to Bartolo's house. And he tells Count, you are going to be the substitute voice teacher. We'll call you Don Alonso, and we'll give you priestly garb, and you'll get entrance into the house, and you'll tell the Dr. Bartolo that Don Basilio is sick. Oh, he's in bed with some horrible, terrible illness, and he can't make it. But that's okay. I too I'm his assistant, and I'm a good voice teacher. So bring the young lady down, and that'll be great because Dr. Bartolo hates classical music. He'll fall asleep, and so the two lovers can talk about whatever they want. Great plan. It's not going to work out so great, but it's very amusing. Now, to further sweeten it, Don Alonso, the Count, when he makes his entrance, he's going to annoy Dr. Bartolo by being sanctimoniously ditzy. He's going to come in fact, listen for these words, pace e gioia, peace and joy. The Count will come in and say, oh, brother, peace and joy to you, joy and peace to all who dwell here. And Bartolo is going to say, well, thank you very much, peace and joy, joy and peace, until it gets on Bartolo's nerves, and finally you'll hear him say, canoia, which sounds just like our word annoy, and guess what? That's exactly what it means. Would you get to the point? Stop saying peace and joy. Jeez, what a bore. Now, this scene happens in both Paisiello's version and Rossini's version. Paisiello does okay. He's going to give, the idea is to annoy Dr. Bartolo. So he's going to let the Count Almaviva repeat these words, pace e gioia, in a suitably annoying nasal monotone. And let's hear how this sounds.
Oh,
it certainly does sound annoying. I think Paisiello maybe forgot that it's okay if Bartolo is annoyed, but maybe we shouldn't be annoyed by something so in such a nasal monotone. Um, it's it's a little weird sounding, more than sanctimonious sounding. I think it's the sweet sanctimony, like, the worst kind of TV evangelist that gets to Bartolo. Also, Bartolo loses his cool too soon. What Rossini understood is it's funnier if Bartolo is patient at first, and it's only when it goes on too long that he finally starts saying, "You are annoying." See, Bartolo, the first thing out of his mouth in response to this substitute music teacher is, "You're annoying. Oh my gosh, stop saying that." Rossini's Bartolo is more polite. At first he's saying, "Well, thank you very much." "Oh, well, isn't that nice of you to say?" "Yes, thank you. Thank you." And then finally, it starts standing on his last nerve, and the Count has a more sweetly sanctimonious melody to sing. Rossini just squeezes a little bit more juice out of the orange.
Pace, gioia sia con voi.
Mille grazie, non s'incomodi.
Gioia e pace per 1000 anni.
Obbligato, in verità.
Pace, gioia sia con voi.
Mille grazie, non s'incomodi.
Gioia e pace per 1000 anni.
Obbligato, in verità. Questo volto non mi ignoto.
Ah, sul colpo andato vuoto.
Non ravviso, non ricordo.
Anche per questo balordo.
Quel volto, ma quel volto.
Un nuovo travestimento.
Non capisco chi sarà.
Più propizio a me sarà. Sì, propizio a me sarà. Gioia e pace, pace e gioia.
Ho capito. Oh, c'è che noia.
Gioia e pace ben di cuore.
Basta, 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 per pietà. Gioia,
Pace,
pace, ho capito, ho capito. Oh, c'è che noia.
ben di cuore.
Pace, gioia, basta, 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 per pietà. Ma che perfido destino.
Il vecchio non mi conosce.
Ma che per fare
Basta, basta, per pietà. Enough, for pity's sake. Ho capito, I get it. It's funnier the more it goes on. I also like the little asides that each of them whispered rapidly to you and me in the audience, in which Bartolo was saying, "This guy looks vaguely familiar." Yes, it's true. In bel canto comedies, if you wear different clothes, no one can recognize you. That's just a little convention we have to accept about opera comedies. Don't worry about it. Yep, you change your hat, suddenly you're a different person. Well, this this little scenario, of course, is going to fail, requiring a third and final crazy scheme. What happens in this one is that, unfortunately, Don Basilio didn't get the letter. And he shows up ready to teach. "Here I am, bring the student in." And of course, Dr. Bartolo is going to say, "Oh my God, how are you? Are you okay?" "What do you mean, am I okay?" And, well, this is not good. This is not good at all. And by now, Figaro has joined the party. He's shown up to give Bartolo his customary shave. And Basilio is going to ruin everything. And by now, for reasons that are too complicated to explain, even Bartolo doesn't want Basilio there. Nobody wants Basilio there. Not Figaro, not Rosina, not Almaviva, and not Bartolo. And so the big thing is, get him out of here. Now again, listen for some Italian. Presto a letto means quickly to bed, because they're saying, "Oh my gosh," the Count finally takes the bull by the horns and says, "You look awful. Your skin is yellow. You're shaking all over. You've got scarlet fever." And Basilio's, "I do? Oh, no. So they're going to tell him buonasera, good night. Okay, goodbye. You better go to the Centera walk-in clinic. Bring your insurance card with you. You shouldn't be here. You're sick. All right, now this happens again in both Paisiello's version and Rossini's version. Let's hear how Paisiello deals with it. All right, now you heard both of the fundamental things that they want to say to him. A letto, go to bed, and buonasera, good night. And it was pleasant, and it was sparkling sounding, it was lively. He did a good job. In Rossini's version, again, it's milking all the humor out of the situation in musical terms. Yes, you'll get the presto a letto. You'll also hear the mock pathos in the Count's voice when he reminds Basilio of how he looks like death warmed over with his yellow skin and his fever. And then this buonasera becomes more of a thing. Now, I wish I actually had time to play this entire musical number for you, because what you have here is a masterful quintet with a structure that's worthy of Viennese classicism at its height. This is, Beethoven greatly admired Rossini's Barber of Seville. It was one of his favorite operas. And this quintet could be one of the reasons. It's extremely complex, and yet you don't think about the musical structure when you listen to it. You only laugh out loud at the shenanigans that the four folks in the household are resorting to try to get Basilio to move out of there and go home. And when they get to the buonasera, Rossini makes more out of it. It's a pleasant little, they're trying to be polite and nice. So one by one, each of the inhabitants of the household sings a pleasant sing-song version of buonasera. Well, it's been really nice, but you need to go now. See what Rossini has made out of a situation that was, again, a little bit cursory in Paisiello's version.
Oh, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto, presto letto. Non mi faccio più pregare. Che calore, che brutta cera, brutta cera, oh brutta sai. Mio signore, buonasera, 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 mio signore, presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, mio signore, buonasera, 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 mio signore, presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, mio signore. Buonasera, 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 mio signore, presto andate via di qua. Buonasera, mendicone, buonasera, buonasera.
And of course, my favorite moment in the entire opera happens soon after a lively bunch of five-part vocal writing. They finally, the four of them, get Basilio out the door, slam the door, and there's a pregnant pause in which they're wiping their brows with relief, when suddenly the doors burst open and he's back because he's enjoying all. There are people who enjoy the attention they get from ill health. He kind of liked it that everybody was making a fuss over him, and he bursts back into the doors and through the doors back into the mansion, and it always gets a belly laugh. Two versions of the same play adapted into operatic form. One in 1782 by Paisiello, another by Rossini 34 years later, 1816. Yes, this is the bicentennial of one of the great operas ever written. Paisiello's is good. It's a shame that Rossini kicked it up to such a degree, kicked it up so many notches that we've forgotten Paisiello's. The play is surefire material. It's kind of hard to mess it up. And Paisiello did not mess it up. This would be a lovely opera for a small company to do, for a college opera theater to do. I think some of the local college opera programs should consider it. It's less vocally demanding than Rossini. It's a fine opera. It was deservedly popular back in its day, but it has been totally... Rossini's version was a tsunami of superior dramatic instincts, a superior understanding of how to portray comedy in music, and that's the one that I know you're going to come out and see a week from today when we open at the Harrison Opera House. Come